Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout, everybody, and welcome to the last Data Science Hangout of 2024. If we haven't had a chance to meet before, I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit, and I'm based in the Boston area. So if you ever want to grab coffee or get together, I'm in Boston. Posit builds enterprise solutions and open source tools for people who do data science with both R and Python. We are also the company formerly called RStudio, just in case anybody needs to hear that. But I'm joined by my lovely co-host today, Libby. Libby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Libby. I'm a community manager who works with Posit to help our beautiful Hangout community thrive. And I'm also a Posit Academy mentor. So speaking of R and Python, I teach both R and Python, or I mentor both R and Python for Posit Academy to help working professionals learn R and Python and use them in their data work.
We're so happy to have you joining us today. If this is your first Hangout, let me just tell you a little bit about it. So the Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across all different industries, to get to chat with others about data science leadership and connect with other data community members who are facing similar things as you. And we get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. Of course, not if it's a holiday week. So we will be on a little bit of a holiday break and coming back January 9th. But if you are watching this as a recording on YouTube and you want to join us live in the future, there will be details to add it to your own calendar below. But thank you so much to those who have helped make this the friendly and welcoming space that it is. And we're all dedicated to keeping it that way. So if you ever have feedback for me about your experience, anything you want to share with me anonymously, or maybe suggestions for topics, I'll share a Google form in the chat with you right now. Feel free to use that. You can always reach out to me directly on LinkedIn too.
And here at the Hangout, we love hearing from you. It doesn't matter what your years of experience are, what your title is, what industry you're in, or what languages you use or do not use. You are welcome here in the spaces for you. I encourage you to connect with each other in the chat. So introduce yourself, say hi, say where you are and what you do. By the way, I'm in San Antonio, Texas. And then also what you like to do for fun. That's often the way that we connect best with each other, right? Feel free to share your LinkedIn profile and also a link to your website so that people can actually find you once this Zoom chat goes away. If you are hiring for any roles, please put them in the chat. We would love for everybody in the community to benefit from that exposure. And then if you're looking for a role, let people know that you're looking, what you're looking for, where you're located, all that stuff. Okay, so this is a community-driven discussion that we're going to be having with Hannes. And that means that you ask the questions. There are 3 ways to jump in. You can raise your hand on Zoom. We'll just call you to ask your question. You can put a question in the Zoom chat. And if you can't ask it, maybe your mic's not working or you're somewhere loud, put an asterisk somewhere in there at the beginning of or the end, and we will ask it for you. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously. Isabella just put that in the chat.
Perfect. Very quick shout out. You'll see in my virtual background, I have a shout out to PositConf. Just letting everybody here know that registration is now open and it's going to be the lowest price that the tickets are ever going to be. So I just want to make sure I tell everybody that here. Didn't want to forget. But with all that, thank you so much for being here. Libby and I are so excited to be joined by our other co-host today, Hannes Mühleisen, co-founder and CEO of DuckDB Labs. And Hannes, I would love to have you introduce yourself first and share a little bit of what you do at work, but also something you like to do for fun outside of work.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm really, really happy to see so many people. On the Thursday before Christmas, I was a bit concerned. Yeah. So my name is Hannes. Yes, I work at DuckDB Labs, but I'm also academic. So I'm also a professor at university. I teach data engineering. And I'm also active in the open source space. So we make a database system called DuckDB, and it's an open source project. And it takes most of my time. So at some point we spun out of the research world into a company, DuckDB Labs, where I'm now sitting. I'm still at the office. It's here in Amsterdam, where it's It's the longest stretch we haven't seen the sun in 30 years. So nice. Yeah, so what I do, I'm leading the company. It's and I'm still hacking around on DuckDB. So today was a glorious day because I got to just sit here and hack around because it's kind of quieting down for the holidays, and it's really amazing. So I did some stuff. That, anyways, what do I do outside work? I like boats. So I live on a houseboat with my family in Amsterdam. It actually can drive around, so sometimes I do that. And when we're not driving around, it's usually some maintenance issues that have to be addressed, which I also really love. I'm a practical person. I like fixing things, and so I also like making software. It has somehow it's connected. The making software and fixing things. I don't know why. It's yeah. So does that answer your first question?
Yes, absolutely.
Very
And
good.
my second question is going to be, can you explain DuckDB to me like I'm 5? For anybody here who hasn't used DuckDB, who doesn't know what it's about or why anyone would ever use it.
Right. So it's kind of funny because DuckDB is a data management system. Okay. It speaks SQL. It's can do transactions. It can store data, tables, these kind of things. Quite traditional in that sense, but it's quite new in the sense that how it's deployed. It can run anywhere. It can run in your Python shell. It can run in your R shell. It can run in the browser. It can run on your phone. It can it kind of puts a technology that used to be sort of locked up in one place and can kind of, because we used to have like data warehouse servers and they were really like one place. And DuckDB really sort of opens that up in sort of deployment sense, and you can put it anywhere now. And it's interesting because it was really built with Anthony D'Amico. Maybe some people know him. He did like ASD3.com. It's like just to analyze survey data with R. And at some point, we started talking about the American Community Survey, which was creating issues because there were too many Americans or something, and there's just there were too many rows. What can I say? And so he started like exploring database technology to make that work. And from these discussions over many years, it's been almost 10 years now that we had the initial discussions. We started designing a database system from scratch that can do that. And so yeah, DuckDB is open source. It's the fastest growing database system I think ever. We are there's some of these metrics that we're tracking. Kind of interesting to see that it's free. Anybody can use it. It's used all over the place. Companies huge and small. And we have a soft spot for data science because of kind of that was the original sort of mental discussions, or the initial discussions that eventually led to it came out of interactions with the R community specifically. So that's why we've been working with people. I mean, we have been working with Posit to make DuckPlyer, but also just in general in the R community we've been spending quite a lot of time, because it's really great as an inspiration to see what people's data problems are, right? Like, we are database systems people. We're like, okay, what are the actual problems? And you find interesting problems like, hey, I need to.
I'll just wear like.
Somebody accidentally unmuted.
Yeah. Because you'll just I need to import CSV files or something like that. And these are things that are very unwieldy. It can be very unwieldy, and we've spent a lot of time on it because it's such a relevant thing. So yeah, DuckDB, it's a piece of software. You can write SQL queries. You can have a wonderful syntax tree, and you can have all these things. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think that the thing that I've gleaned from people, because I have not had a need to use DuckDB, and so I'm coming at this from like I don't know all the answers standpoint, is that when people need to work with data that's bigger than working memory, and they can kind of create a temporary database on their system and store that in disk instead of in working memory. Is that right?
That definitely can be done. It doesn't have to be temporary. It can also just be, you just keep your data in the DuckDB database. Absolutely. It becomes interesting. So people generally say, right, Excel stops working at 100,000 rows. R maybe stops working at, I don't know, 10 million or something like that. It's like base R, dplyr, that kind of stuff. And then, so DuckDB is kind of for this mid-range where you go, let's say up to a couple of billion of rows or something like that. That's really where people used to go for like these big data solutions in the past. And now you have like an engine where that can get you sort of much further on your local laptop, right? Because you have your laptop already, you've paid for it, it's there, it's sitting there. It can do surprisingly a lot of computation. But indeed, if your biggest file is 15 megabytes, then there is probably no need for it. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So, Hannes, one of the takeaways for me from Hangouts this year, and I was thinking about our conversation a few weeks back, is around like finding the things that people might not think are cool and focusing on them. And I was thinking back to when Marco Gorelli was also talking about like getting excited about things that people might think are boring. And I've just been thinking about for myself, what are those areas that I want to dive deeper into? And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
But working on things that are boring, yeah, it's very I don't know. I don't think
Well,
those are boring things.
I guess it's more so like your thoughts on that and you sharing like advice for finding opportunities where there are things that might be uncool to others. Like, how did you start to
Yeah.
focus on databases?
Yeah. So I think in general, there's really no shortage on sort of ideas on what to work on. And I think personally, there is a bunch of, I really like looking at Stack Overflow and Reddit and see what kind of problems people have, right? And then you can see, like, and really you have to squint, right? Because like one specific person's issue is not really interesting because there's so many of them. But if you see the same exact sort of class of problems sort of coming up, 10,000 times, then maybe, there is something there. So one of the things that we did was we were teaching these courses with Spark. Maybe some people have worked with Spark. So I was teaching a course with Spark. It wasn't a great success because people generally didn't manage to work with Spark. So we were like, okay, here's how you Spark. We tried to teach them here's how you operate this thing. Obviously, we had some concept on how to do it. But then nobody managed. And these were not toddlers. These were like people who had been around data for ages and they just couldn't manage. And after a couple of years of giving this course, we started thinking like, yeah, maybe there's something there. Maybe that doesn't have to be so difficult to, I don't know, write a Parquet file, right? And I really encourage also all my colleagues in research and in the open source space. It's like it's so easy to, I mean, people tend to want to set their own agenda and then just basically execute that. But I feel like for me, I really want to address an issue, and for that really there's so much information, there's so many resources on. You can just download the Reddit dump or whatever it's called, and then and just start analyzing it, and you will see what are the things people struggle with. I can't get this to work, just search for that, and then you have some idea. And that's I think also part of the that's also part of the secret of maybe in the tidyverse, that this really addresses a need that this idea that you have to have some concept of what your data should look like. That's also, I think, a result of just seeing people struggle for a long time.
Yeah. Thank you. Mike, I see you asked a question earlier in the chat, and I think this is always a fun one to talk about. Do you want to jump in? Mike Smith.
Sorry,
Frantically
coming off mute. This is probably the Christmas season type question. So why duck?
Why duck? So there used to be a duck called Wilbur, and he was my pet duck, and he lived with me on the boat, and it was very cute. very cuddly duck. You know, who could have imagined that ducks can be cuddly? But yeah, so he eventually flew away, and you know, we like to think started a ducky family somewhere. But he in his memory, DuckDB is called DuckDB. Yeah, little Wilbur. I have a picture here somewhere. Okay, hang on.
Yes. Duck pictures, we demand them.
Duck pictures.
Livy, did you
Here's
bring your stuffed animal duck?
No, I didn't. I thought about it. It was all dusty
So
on the shelf.
this is little Wilbur. You can see him there. This is me on the other side, obviously,
Oh,
and he's just standing there, hanging out. You know, being happy, being very loud. Ducks are loud, man.
ducks are loud. I love ducks. I have a bit of a duck collection.
Oh,
Duck books, duck stuffed animals. Well, there's some amazing questions that are popping up in the chat, so we've totally got to get to some of them. Marcos, you had a great question.
Let's
Did you
go.
want to jump in?
Yes. Can people hear
Do
me?
you remember? Yes.
yes.
Yes. My question is, I've used DuckDB for some of my personal projects. Like it's great at like CSV to Parquet. Their files are big. I like the vector data support was really helpful combined with some other simple small language model stuff. But work, my data's all up in the cloud. My data's all like in Snowflake. Like, how do you see DuckDB as mainly a tool for like kind of researchers working on their laptops, kind of in like academic environments, or do you see a corporate kind of use case where our data is mostly in the cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do see actually a ton of corporate use. This is the fastest growing, let's say, area of DuckDB use. So there is a lot of the sort of I'm here on my laptop and I just have to deal with this data sort of use. And that's also where DuckDB came from, as I've explained. But there is a ton of use in corporate, and it's less, let's say, as a sort of complete sort of system, but people use it a lot as a building block. So say I have, for example, if you look at one of the modern BI tools out there, almost all of them use DuckDB under the hood. If you look at, for example, there's big sort of data transformation companies like Fivetran that are also using DuckDB under the hood. So you might not actually realize it that and it's not like I don't know, Snowflake, where you're talking to Snowflake, you're talking to Snowflake because there's a like little blue logo up in the corner there. But what we see a lot with DuckDB is that people put it in somewhere, and just you can kind of figure it out if you really want to, that it's running DuckDB under the hood sometimes, because the SQL dialect will have some things that will give this away. But very often it's also just pre-baked queries, pre-baked schemas, just run this thing and people are happy, and that's really fine with us. So we don't it's open source software, people can do whatever they want. But that's, I think, the growth that we see a lot in these sort of use cases. And for people that do want an end-to-end sort of solution, there is MotherDuck, right? There is a company that is building a DuckDB SaaS, which is has look and feel, I would say, similar to Snowflake or BigQuery or whatever else there is. So there's these two things, right? Yeah, and some use cases that are kind of wild. So if people put it in cars, and then I'm like, are you sure? It's like, but yeah. So I think there is a lot of use in big tech. It's just sometimes not visible.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Zach asked a question with an asterisk, so I'll read it. But it was, I believe I read somewhere that DuckDB can be used with Shiny. Generally, how does it integrate with R, Python, and data visualization tools?
Yeah, I think there's some demos out there, people using DuckDB with Shiny. Generally, so how does it integrate with R? And that's okay. My headset is letting me know that my battery is low, so I will switch to something else.
Your audio was like just clipping and cutting out a tiny bit, but it was still okay. We could hear you.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Great. so you get to see my ears. But the question, so the integration with R is really interesting, and it's not like anything you've kind of ever seen, I think, in terms of data management systems, maybe except with SQLite, because it's this in-process architecture where the whole thing runs inside whichever process invokes it. So with R, you just have an R package that's, install.packages DuckDB. And that actually is not a client or a driver like maybe for other systems. It actually contains the whole thing. And then when you start it, it actually runs inside this R process that you're sitting in front of. And yeah, that has some very nice benefits. For example, you can read stuff from memory. Like if you have a data frame in memory, we can read the data frame. When you have a query result, you can directly turn that into data frame or arrow structures. And the same thing also happens in Python, where you can just load the pip install DuckDB and you install the package, and then you can just load it up inside this Python environment and look at pandas data frames or polars structures or arrow structures again, because it's just right there in this process, and it doesn't have all this like client server stuff. You don't have to set a password because there's no point of having a password. It's right there in your thing. It's yours, right? You can do whatever you want with it.
I wanted to just call out quickly. I see Isabella shared in the chat. Sarah Altman at Posit gave a great webinar yesterday on using DuckDB and Shiny together.
Hey, my job is done.
So there's a great blog post there, and then the YouTube recording too.
Great.
Elaine, I see you asked a question in the chat just now. Do you want to jump in next? And nice to see you.
Sure. Hi. So I've been reading more about DuckDB and using it in some of the creative architecture bucket of use cases and doing serverless apps and things. And I realized that there's a lot of things I think I know that I don't really know, like what is a database? And I think in the past I've thought of as a database as something that has to be in the cloud because lots of things are happening to it in different places, and therefore I have to query that instead of just having my data files locally. But files can also be in the cloud, and DuckDB can query files. So what is I need to update my mental models of a lot of things. Can you weigh in on how data scientists should think about what a database is? And is DuckDB actually changing the concept of database, or do I just not understand that a database is always being created under the hood somewhere?
No, I think it's definitely changing what sort of this conception of what people have of what a database is and what you alluded to, where it lives. Okay, so I mean, what is a database? There especially in stats, there is a lot of confusion with the word. So I mean, because there is the database, which is just a collection of rows, and then there's the database management system, which is of course something like DuckDB, which is the system that you use. This confusing terminology, but in principle, it's just a collection of tables, right? And so that's what I consider to be a database. It's a collection of tables. And then you have the database management system, which provides management of these tables, like store them, change them, query them most prominently. And now it's not like, and again, in the past, it used to be the case that these things were sort of cloud, some sort of data warehouse is also a term there. It's like a Teradata somewhere, or maybe a or I don't know, some Oracle server somewhere, and that was your database. And it's true that in the past these things were kind of locked into these specific pieces of hardware, also often because they would just don't run on anything else. But what we are seeing, and I think that's kind of the point of DuckDB, is that you can just pull a lot of this stuff up, into places that you haven't sort of considered yet. And like your laptop is something that I find it always funny when people sit in front of a $3,000 sort of MacBook that runs a web browser and nothing else, right? And then they use that to spend more money on Snowflake in order to query like a bunch of rows, right? when they have actually pretty powerful machine sitting right there. And so what you said, I really liked. It's also the creative architecture. It does really change people's perception, I think, and for people's perceptions also maybe should change in terms of what does database actually mean. And part of our mission is to maybe reduce the negative connotation a bit with the word, because I think data scientists in particular have been how should I say, a bit fearful or loathsome of database tech in general, because it worked differently from the other stuff. So it's why we're trying really hard to make it easy to use, friendly, these kind of things. But in principle, yeah, it does actually change the architecture. I've done some talks if people are interested on how the two-tier architecture is sort of no longer up to date, because it's just one of like 15 different models of deploying data management systems. So yeah, it's really cool. But it is, I agree, it also took me a while to realize this and I'm doing this all day long. So it's
comforting, maybe.
Hannes, we can hear you okay, but it's doing a little bit of a weird like jumbling thing at the end of some words. I don't know if it's trying to reconnect to your headphones or.
I can try another. Let me maybe just try another set of. I can just go to my.
It's not awful, but if it could be better, may as well spend the 1 minute to figure it out.
Absolutely. And now I'm going to go to the speakers. So is this better?
Yep, you sound good.
Great. So
okay, and it wasn't really bad. I just wanted to, just in case it stayed the whole time.
That's perfectly fine. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. And I think, Libby, you were going to call somebody in from the chat.
Yeah, Travis had some great questions. And Travis, I have the same question. So I would love you to ask.
Sure. Thank you. So you mentioned that maybe 50 megabyte or less files, maybe DuckDB isn't the right solution. But are there cases?
I'm not saying it's the wrong solution. I'm just saying then your maybe existing stack also works fine. I mean, there's no lower limit if that's what you want to know.
Yeah, because I was kind of curious. So, for example, I work in clinical trials, and most of our data is actually small, but we do often have a lot of relational tables. I assume this could be a good use case for DuckDB?
Yeah.
There's could you walk me through that, because I'm sort of a newbie to this stuff, like many here. Like, how does that look for us? If I don't ever want Snowflake, because I don't have data that large, but we also do lack proper databasing practice. I think as an industry, we don't usually do that in pharma because our data is so small. So what could you dream up like a stack for me, like in?
For sure. So I think you're in bioinformatics. Is that fair to say? Or
sure. I mean, a lot of it's actually just straight up clinical data. So we'll have like patients that come in, because bioinformatics kind of starts to imply more large data. We don't even have that. It's just going to be like people, and they showed up at a clinic and they had a lab value or something like this, right?
Yeah. No, so I think what really is interesting is what people sometimes forget is that there's like more to database systems already traditionally than like just store of tables. And I think what's interesting for things like maybe smallish data is all this integrity sort of dance, right? Where you say, okay, I'll actually define some relationships here, like foreign keys, primary keys, constraints, these kind of things, and that will actually allow me to keep my data consistent. And with a transactional system like DuckDB, it's actually will also make sure that any changes you make to the data will not break any of these constraints. And that's actually something that I think data frame libraries users in general have just no concept of, because it's never been something they had. But it's pretty standard in sort of relational technology. So I think what might be interesting, if you say I don't have so huge tables, but they are kind of connected in a complex way, and I need to do all these funky recombinations. Then it's definitely a great use case, because you are able to basically go from one consistent state to another consistent state, and your let's say your value per byte is extremely high, right? Like it's not like that you collected some log file somewhere and it's like probably garbage, but maybe something interesting is there. it's more like, no, this took, every row, was a whole patient trajectory, and that cost, $100,000. So it's very high value data. And maybe we want to treat high value data better than sticking it in a CSV file. Maybe we do want to have a schema. Maybe we do want to make sure that we have the right types. Maybe we want to have the constraints. Maybe we want to have the integrity relationships with other tables. So that's also something that that was actually in my talk at PositConf this year, that I tried to sort of make this point where I was trying to say, hey, there's more to table technology than just running queries. It's also just all these other guarantees that you kind of get for free, that could be interesting for data practitioners.
That's an awesome insight. So where would the file, I mean, I'm assuming DuckDB, this is another novice-like question, right? So like DuckDB, it's serverless is a word I use or something like that. So there's a file, and where does it live?
There's a file.
Isn't it like, do you pass it around? Do people email DuckDB?
Yeah, people do
really
actually.
Now, but like.
So fun story. So when we designed the data file, the file format for DuckDB, way back when, we actually, this use case of people emailing around files was something is definitely on the board, because we saw it happening, and with other things. No, so how does this work in the deployment model? Well, it depends a bit, right? So depends a bit on how your update process works, on how often things are updated. But for example, an easiest case for static data files, what we see a lot is people putting these files in a central location, maybe on cloud storage or something like that, and then DuckDB can directly query that, right? Or you put this on your server, and you just interact with this file there, like in the olden days with a mainframe, perhaps. We also see some interesting use cases where people just jury rig some sort of RPC calls around DuckDB, because indeed the multiplayer experience in DuckDB wasn't a design goal, and still isn't a design goal. And for that, you have other things. You have things like MotherDuck, that's kind of their core thing. So they kind of extend this thing with a sort of multi-user sort of sharing capability when you don't have the stuff on your computer. But that's more complex deployments. I think that's a different. It's more the traditional data warehouse sort of.
When you're saying multiplayer, so if I wanted to have multiple users, let's say, access through a front end and write new entries to a DuckDB file, that's where MotherDuck and other things come in. Is that?
That is definitely where these come in. I mean, you can definitely have, if you have like a web application that's sitting on top of a DuckDB file, they can definitely have multiple users writing it at the same time. It's just that you cannot, I don't know, you cannot copy that file to another computer and magically have these two things connected. It's just not what we do, right?
Got it. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We have a question from another amazing developer in our open source community. Marco, can you ask your question live? If you're still here.
Yeah, sure. Would love to. Hi. Sorry,
There he
hope
is.
this is an okay forum to ask this question. Just noticed upgrading to DuckDB 1.1. That now if I do lots of operations over an empty window, like lag over just empty bracket, that now the order of rows is preserved compared to the input. And before that, it didn't used to happen above a certain size. But in the release, and this seems like an awesome change, but in the release notes, I couldn't find anything about it. And is this an intentional change in 1.1?
Probably. So the thing is, we get a bit overwhelmed with the release notes, because it's usually such a gigantic amount of changes that go in, that you mean that it wasn't mentioned in the blog post, or it was just not in the release notes at all?
Yeah, not in the release notes, yeah.
Okay. It could, I mean, this is a window function related change, right? So I'm not the expert on window function. I did implement the first iteration of it, but since Richard, one of our guys, has taken it over, and he has been spending a lot of time on the order of window functions. So I just merged a pull request yesterday with another set of changes to the order of window functions. So it could be that it's changing it again. In general, the SQL order is not defined, right? Like SQL systems don't have a defined order. Window functions usually have an order defined, so then we can use that. We are trying more, let's say, to keep the input order alive, let's say, as we go forward, because people just expect it. So it could be that this was intentional. I'm not entirely sure. There's so many things going on in DuckDB land that that I'm not, that I'm not actually on top of. So that's not entirely sure, but great to hear it's improved.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you want
And
to
great to
align
see you,
more with the
Marco.
expectations of the data frame. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Isabella, I see you had a question a bit earlier.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Hannes.
Hi.
I had a roadmap question, if that's all right. So row-wise operations in dplyr are nice and legible, but they're not as fast as other options with large databases. But the data.table package recently implemented argument for faster row-wise operations. So my question is, do you know if DuckDB and dplyr has any roadmap for faster row-wise operations?
You will have to explain to me what you mean by row-wise operations.
Oh, okay. It's like a different way.
No.
Did Isabella freeze?
It's just another way.
Oh,
Sorry,
you froze for just a second, but you're back now, Isabella.
Okay. Maybe I can follow up with you. It's a way of working.
Okay, we'll jump to the next question. Sorry, Isabella, it keeps freezing, but if you reconnect after, we can jump back. I see there was a Slido question. Now I'm wondering, am I the one that's frozen?
No, yeah, I know, I can see
Okay.
it fine. Not
Okay.
you. I can make some movement.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
It's still walking, you're still live.
Okay, great. There was a Slido question that was, how would you describe the culture at DuckDB, and what steps do you take to nurture and maintain that culture within the organization?
That's a great question. So the culture here at the company or the project, I mean, I can talk about both, right? The culture here at the company is a bit like we took what we knew from a research group and tried to improve it where we thought it was going wrong. Um, so, it's a very sort of, I would say, progress sort of oriented team here that we all pretty very good at database engineering, and we just enjoy each other's sort of company. And generally, we have a rule that we only hire friendly people. That has worked really well so far. And in the project itself, so DuckDB is a bit special because we don't have open governance in DuckDB. So that's it is open source, MIT license. You can do whatever you want with it, but there is no sort of democracy. That sounds a bit terrible, I have to admit. There is no democracy in terms of direction of the project, and that's intentional because we've seen specifically Apache projects to go down the drain because they couldn't agree on a vision, and in the end they just did whatever, everything everyone wanted, and in the end they're unmaintainable messes. And it's because we have seen this so many times, we just decided that we're gonna keep control over what goes in. So there's Mark and me, the two original creators of DuckDB, just to keep the vision. We do have very strict rules on behavior, like not strict, I would say. We do, and we are very conscious of keeping a productive and friendly tone on things like GitHub issues, comments, and we're trying to really, really be friendly to everyone. I think we have over the years, I think banned 2 people of our GitHub repo, which is for really unacceptable behavior, but we're really trying to have a positive interaction also on our Discord and all the other places we interact with the community. And I think it's worked out really well. The tone is incredibly friendly. People want to help each other. So yeah, I think it's also just leading by example. There's other open source projects, like Linux, where the head guy in charge is famously grumpy all the time. Like that will trickle down through the community. And we're not doing that. We try to be, consistently friendly, and it does actually, and I think it shows in the community. But it's also something that I think Hadley is doing extremely well. It's just this incredible civility that he brought to the previously grumpy R community, I think.
Thank you. So maybe just a real quick clarification. So I think we find this with our studio being a product and then being the company and an open source and pro product name and then becoming Posit. So how are DuckDB and DuckDB Labs separate in like 2 sentences?
Yeah, I mean, the DuckDB is the project. This database project is called DuckDB, and DuckDB Labs is just the company, the commercial entity that exists, where most of the developers work, and where we work with, corporate partners that have, special corporate needs around DuckDB.
Thank you. Sunday, I saw you asked a question, and it actually also might answer Javier's question. Javier, if you wanted to jump in and follow up with Sunday too. Sunday, go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Oops, one moment. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much. I'm a big DuckDB enthusiast. I can't remember when last I used SQLite since I found DuckDB. Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for the great things like, group by all. It was long overdue. Now, but thinking about, things like orbital and how that integrates nicely with tidy models, and then those queries, which you could pass into SQL for machine learning. Is there any plan for some support for machine learning as we go into the future with DuckDB?
Yeah, I think we're quite happy where we're at in terms of API or general focusing on relational transformation of tables. I mean, we are sometimes expanding. We recently added like pivot statement, which is a pivot statement which doesn't exist in SQL in general. So we are expanding there, but we try to keep it focused on let's say table-y operations. There are some operations to do simple, regressions and stuff like that in DuckDB, but it's really not our focus. There are other toolkits that are great at machine learning tasks, and we try to integrate. So that's one of the strengths that I think DuckDB has. By being in process, we can, for example, export to I don't know, scikit-learn fairly efficiently, and then they can do their thing, and we can pull back the results and do something else. It's not like traditional databases, like, for example, Oracle, that have to sort of push everything into the database system itself for them to be efficient. We can just say, you want to pull this out and run something in it? Great, just do it. It's not going to take forever. So yeah, we try to focus, and we're a small team. We're 20 people. We need to focus. We need to, only do things we can sort of do. And SQL is already a let's say challenging target.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Javier, does that cover your question as well?
It does, but I do have other questions.
Oh, do you want to hop in with a follow-up? Sure.
Yeah. So I think it was Marco earlier asked about a different Marco asked about DuckDB's kind of roadmap for interacting with maybe data warehouse data.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything DuckDB can do today with ADBC, like the ODBC, JDBC competitor?
Yeah, so we do have ADBC support in DuckDB. So this, for those who don't know, this is like something came out of Voltron or the Arrow project, where the idea was to update the standard database protocols a bit, and we do support ADBC. We also generally support Arrow ingestion. So if your database supports Arrow, then you can ingest that into DuckDB quite efficiently. We do have specialized connectors for things like SQLite, Postgres, MySQL. And what we do have on the roadmap is a generic ODBC connector that you basically can also just pull stuff out of your SQL Server or Oracle or DB2 or, these ancient things into DuckDB. But we're also seeing a lot of interesting developments with things like Iceberg or Delta Lake, where the big players are starting to make things accessible through these interfaces. And yeah, we are working on that. That already works okay with DuckDB, but we're working also on that to improve that further. So we do see a lot of use cases where basically an analyst will just pull some stuff from the production database into the local DuckDB and then just run with it and do analysis on it. That we see a lot, and we want to support it more. Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to using the UC catalog extension.
Yeah, that's pretty experimental though. So you were
Yeah,
warned.
no, I know. And then another just like request, you know, and I know this stuff takes time, it's not priority, but like the way our users today are accustomed to seeing package documentation, it's very much in the form of like, here is a vignette that if you've never used this package or tool, like by the end of the vignette, you'll be able to at least replicate a lot of it. And I feel
Yeah.
like DuckDB and Arrow, Polaris, like these other Polars, even like these other frameworks are sort of written with a software engineering mindset where it's like, here's my documentation. And the documentation is like, here's a function name. Oh, and here's the argument names underneath this function. Like it's very topical, right?
Yeah.
So again, like low priority. I love DuckDB. I love what you guys are doing, but just like more robust documentation would be awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And there's shout out to Gabor, who is our DevRel, who is really spending a ton of time on documentation. One thing that we sometimes run into is that the surface is just so gigantic that it seems like kind of pointless to show you 3 examples of SQL, right? Like, because there's just this, it's like trying to teach you programming in the vignette. It's not entirely the format for it, right? So sometimes we say, okay, go learn SQL somewhere else and then come back. Or at least because it's difficult, but it's a point well taken. Absolutely, that we could have something a bit more on sort of the getting started side there. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Javier, I see Seb just volunteered you to help update documentation.
I know. I need to do more of this, honestly. I don't know. I just feel like by the end of the workday, I'm so spent, and many others in my shoes are like so spent that we don't want to contribute back to the open source community, despite us like literally my bread and butter is open source at work. So yeah, it's on my 2025 goals.
I'll help you out.
Thanks, man.
Seb, do you want to jump in next with your question?
Yeah, so hey Hannes, nice
Hi, Seb.
to see you. My question was kind of around, and I haven't contributed to open source projects, so this may be even just a general question, but especially since DuckDB is, increasingly used everywhere, I wonder how security is evaluated for open source projects. Like, obviously companies, where we work with clinical data or anything like that, it's a huge possible risk. And so I'd be curious to see what take from the open source side.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question. And I mean, it's not, we do get some sort of improvement in the general situation by not having client server, because there's no server to run. There's no sort of port that can be accidentally left open or something like that, right? Like there's no, like this whole traditional security problem of, oh, you can attack this protocol over the, or, with some crafted numbers or something that we don't have. But there are things that we do have a website on our documentation about securing DuckDB, because there are aspects that can be surprising. Like if you, for example, you're running it somewhere and you're just opening up the SQL prompt to the world, expecting nothing bad will happen. Well, bad things can happen because the SQL prompt is extremely powerful. It would be like opening up an R shell to the world. You can do it, but you have to be a bit careful, right? So we have a website up that describes that. The biggest security sort of concerns we have is around distribution of binaries, right? So we build the binaries in our CI, and yeah, we distribute them, and CRAN builds binaries, and so what we have to be very careful that nobody manages to implant malicious code into the stuff that we distribute, right? So that is, I think, the thing I am mostly concerned about, and that comes down to, like, nailing down your CI, having signatures on things, having sort of hashes being checked regularly, that to make sure that there's a lot of sort of stuff in the background that we have to do that doesn't really end up, that is not visible in the product, but we are definitely aware of it. One thing sometimes that's a bit annoying is when some open source user shows up and asks me to fill their 40-question security questionnaire. That does happen. It has happened with NASA even, that they say, oh, we can only use your thing when you fill this thing. And I'm like, what? What am I supposed to do? I should fill your questionnaire? I don't understand. But I mean, but if it's somehow reasonable, we try to help, obviously, because we know that it helps the users. But it is definitely something that I understand people's concerns about. We do offer, sorry for the plug, we do offer commercial support contracts for people who want extra assurances. But we try our best to make sure that the distribution is intact, and nobody that pulls a what's this, XZ or whatever it was on us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I see a question here in the chat from Sanjay. Did you want to jump in and ask? It has an asterisk, but if you're available to ask.
Oh, hi. This is Sanjay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hi, Sanjay.
I had a question around production grade database use. So we have IoT sensors, installed thousands of them, which keep sending data, and we pump them through MQTT. We pump them into a MariaDB database, which is working fine. Only thing is, when the database grows in size, the querying gets slow. So is DuckDB going to help there, where it can write continuously every second into a database and then also allow reads simultaneously?
Yeah. So the querying thing, yes, I think DuckDB is for complex queries something on the order of 100 or 1,000 times faster. So that's really not compared to MySQL. So that's really not the problem. The problem or the challenge comes indeed with the ingestion. If you have so DuckDB uses a columnar storage layer, which means that the tables are organized in columnar way, and that means that doing a lot of small appends can be problematic, and that's something that you have to sort of try out to see if the write speed can keep up with whatever you're sending in it. So tends to be the case that row layouts like MySQL or Postgres will generally be better at appending quickly, but the querying speed is definitely going to be better.
Yeah, but that's half problem solved only, unless we append at fast speed.
It's probably gonna work fine. I'm just warning you. If you're looking for transactions per second or something like that, then the row-based guys are probably gonna win.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Libby, do you want to call on the next one? It's hard to pick the final questions when we get down to these few.
It is. I was just thinking 5 minutes left. Oh my gosh. There's a great question on Slido, which is, when you first came up with DuckDB, did you struggle to get acceptance from the data industry? And if you did, how did you get over it?
Great question. So we were initially ridiculed for not having a distributed system. And it was our strong belief, and hill we were willing to die on, that you don't actually need distributed systems in order to query sort of significant amounts of data. And I was like, I mean, I didn't really worry me so much, because I thought, great, this is, I'll just, if that takes 10 years for the world to acknowledge distance, fine. It actually didn't take all that long. I was ready to sort of be ridiculed for much longer than we actually were. And I think the crazy growth we see with DuckDB and the blog posts like big data is dead and stuff like that have really changed the data industry in my opinion. And so we are no longer ridiculed. I'm happy to report. Even we were even working with some of the big data companies, and so I think that was kind of that was a big thing. And of course, we are from Europe. The data industry tends to ignore things that are not made in the Bay Area. That was also something I was a bit concerned about in the beginning. It was like, yeah, we can be as good as we want, but is it gonna actually arrive in the US? And that has also worked out. So that was also something I was maybe a little bit concerned of.
Thank you. So earlier this week, we had a customer meeting with Wes and Hadley, and somebody had asked them both who are their data heroes, and Wes McKinney pointed to you. And so I wanted to ask you that question too.
My data hero.
Who are your data heroes?
Well, okay. I think that Hadley is definitely one of my heroes. So one of the reasons I was extremely nervous about talking at the POSITConf this year was because I have talked in front of 100,000 people, but somehow in front of Hadley was making me extremely nervous. So that was interesting to see also about myself. And I think it has to do with yeah, just people that have managed single-handedly to turn the industry around. Yeah, who are my heroes? Yeah, I think I have to name Hadley, and of course Wes, but I cannot say him. This would be circular, so I would I would have to think about that a bit more. But no, I think I really in my field in data management systems, it's really, if you can show that people use your thing, then you have kind of won the argument. And I think both Hadley and Wes have shown this in a great sort of way. And so for me, also people like Stonebreaker, the Mike Stonebreaker, the Turing Award winner, and one of the people behind Postgres is somebody who I look up to. Because just of the immense amount of impact they've had. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you. I just put this up as a post on LinkedIn earlier today, if anybody wants to go and add their own too. Hannes, we have 1 minute left here, and I'm wondering, was there anything
1 minute till vacation? Sorry.
Hope to share with us today, whether that's, well, anything top of mind for you or a meaningful piece of career advice or anything else you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm sorry I couldn't answer all the questions. Feel free to email me. It's hannes@duckdb.org. It's very easy. If you have any sort of direct questions about to me, I'm not can't promise I will immediately answer. But career advice, I think going for impact. I think that's just that's what I mentioned earlier with looking at Reddit. If you look at what will have the biggest sort of impact for the most people, that's something that I think is worthwhile. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, Hannes, I know we are the last call holding you off from your holiday vacation right now, but thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us to close out a year of amazing data science hangouts, and really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you all who are here and make this space what it is and join us week after week. We will be on a bit of a holiday break until January 9th, where we'll be joined by Michael Chow and Rich Iannone at Posit, who work on the GT and Great Tables packages. But I wish you all a wonderful holiday season with your friends and family, and a happy new year. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I love seeing the messages in the chat, so I'm not ending it yet. But thank you all so much. There might be a survey that pops up at the end if there's any feedback or suggestions or things you want to share with us. Thank you all so much. Bye.